Welcome back to Mystic English, where every story helps you not just speak English, but think more clearly, express yourself deeply, and connect with the world in a way most people never do. If you're new here, subscribe now, not just to improve your language, but to grow into the version of yourself that you've always known was possible. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever listened to someone and felt like every word they said mattered? They didn't shout, they didn't ramble, but still, everyone listened. Every head turned when they spoke. You couldn't explain why, but their words felt expensive, like they were saying less and meaning more. That's how the 1% speak. They don't speak to impress. They speak to direct, to lead, to move. And the truth is, this isn't something they're born with. It's something they learn. This is the story of Adrian, a man who didn't grow up around power, but eventually learned how to sit at the table with those who had it. Not by being louder, but by learning how to speak with weight. Adrian was soft-spoken. Always had been. Growing up, people would often talk over him. At school, in college, even in his first job. It wasn't that he had nothing to say. It was that no one waited for him to say it. He'd start a sentence, then stop midway as someone else took over. Slowly, without even realizing it, Adrian started shrinking. He would smile, nod, and agree. Even when he disagreed, he became what people call easy to work with, which, in reality, just meant he never challenged anyone. But deep inside, Adrian felt like he was fading. He wasn't weak, he was just quiet, and the world didn't reward quiet, until one meeting changed everything. It was a cold Tuesday in November. Adrian had joined a new company as a junior analyst. His manager was out sick, and he was told to attend a senior strategy meeting just to take notes. The room was intimidating. Suits, laptops, men with silver hair and sharp watches. The CEO was there too, a calm, focused man named Mr. Lawrence. Adrian sat in the corner, notebook open, invisible. The meeting went on for 45 minutes, full of talking, pitching, and debating. Charts were thrown up on screens. People spoke over one another. One executive slammed his pen down, clearly frustrated. Then, suddenly, Mr. Lawrence looked around the table and said something unexpected. "Adrian, you've been listening. What do you think?" The room went silent. Adrian's heart started racing. He hadn't prepared to speak. But the CEO was looking straight at him, calm, curious, respectful. For the first time in a long time, Adrian felt seen. He took a breath, sat up straight, and instead of trying to sound smart, he just said what he truly thought, clearly, slowly, without apology. He spoke for 1 minute, maybe less. But when he stopped, the room was still quiet. Mr. Lawrence nodded, then turned to the others and said, "That's what clarity sounds like." That moment changed Adrian, not because he was praised, but because he realized something that most people never do. It's not how much you say, it's how clean your words are. From that day forward, Adrian stopped trying to fill space. He began studying silence, power, presence. He learned how great communicators didn't rush. They let their words land. They didn't use big words, they used precise ones. And most importantly, they spoke only when they had something worth saying. And when they did, people listened. Adrian didn't become a powerful speaker overnight. In fact, after that meeting, he went back home and stared at his ceiling for hours, wondering why that 1 minute had felt so different from anything else he had ever said. It wasn't the words. It was the weight behind the words. He remembered how his voice had felt steady, even though his heart was racing. how his words didn't try to prove anything. They just pointed at the truth. That night, he realized something quietly profound. Speaking like the 1% isn't about sounding more confident. It's about needing to say less because you're rooted in something deeper. Over the next few months, Adrian became obsessed, not with sounding smarter, but with understanding how powerful people actually speak. He noticed they paused before they spoke. They chose silence over noise. And when they did speak, it was never rushed. They weren't afraid of being interrupted because they carried a presence that made interruption feel inappropriate. Adrian started to practice this. Every conversation became a study. He began cutting out filler words. No more like, or you know? He also trained himself to sit with silence, to allow a second or two before replying, to show that he was listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. More than that, Adrian started listening to people differently. Instead of listening to reply, he listened to understand. He realized that the best communicators don't just talk clearly. They think clearly. So he started reading, not just to collect facts, but to sharpen his thinking. Philosophy, psychology, biographies, he didn't care if it was trendy. He cared if it made him think more clearly, because the more clearly he thought, the fewer words he needed to express himself. And slowly, people noticed. Colleagues who used to talk over him began asking for his opinion. Senior managers invited him to meetings, not as a note-taker, but as a contributor. Not because he changed who he was, but because he refined how he showed up. And, perhaps the most powerful change of all, Adrian stopped trying to sound like the people he admired. He stopped imitating big words, fancy phrases, or dramatic tones. Instead, he focused on alignment. If he didn't believe in what he was saying, he didn't say it. Because the truth is, the 1% don't just speak clearly, they speak from clarity. They speak with conviction. They don't need to dominate the room because they already know who they are. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Adrian walked into a client negotiation meeting. The other side had brought in an aggressive legal team, sharp suits, faster mouths. They interrupted, they challenged, they tried to dominate the room. Older Adrian would have shrunk. He would have looked down, let others lead, told himself, "This isn't my place." But this Adrian, he had learned to hold the floor, not with volume, but with calm. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply explained, slowly, directly, confidently. The room quieted, not because he demanded silence, but because people respect presence. And Adrian had grown into someone who didn't need to prove himself anymore, because his voice, and more importantly, his thinking, spoke for him. And that's the secret most people miss. To speak like the 1%, you don't need a perfect accent or a list of complicated words. You need to slow down. You need to stop filling space with noise. You need to say only what you believe, and believe deeply in what you say. Power in speech doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from controlling yourself. From pausing when others rush. From choosing the word that fits, not the word that impresses. From thinking clearly, so your language becomes clear too. Adrian didn't become someone else. He became more himself. But sharper, calmer, clearer. And maybe that's what you need too. Not to sound smarter, not to copy successful people, but to understand yourself deeply enough that your voice, your real voice, becomes impossible to ignore. If this story helped you see speaking in a new way, like it's not just about English, but identity, then like this video, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. And in the comments below, write, "I choose clarity." This is Mystic English, where every story helps you speak better, not just in language, but in life. Thank you for watching. We'll meet again in the next video.